Dr. Punch, thanks for sitting down. We're approaching 1 year since the May 16th tornado, and you look around North City, there's still so much recovery to be had. But let's talk about you personally for a second and backtrack right after the tornado. What compelled you to start 314 Oasis that was born out of the aftermath of the tornado?
Well, I was directly impacted. I lived at the time in the tornado's path and felt very much the trauma of the storm, but also had been working for years in neighborhoods in North City and North County, but been working in North City for years to try to support people who were dealing with trauma on a day-to-day basis. I'll tell it to you this way. When I looked at the pathway of the storm, it was as if a bullet had gone through the city itself. And I knew what that would mean for the many, many people who had been displaced by the storm. And so I used the resources that I had at my fingertips to begin a response. And then I realized that the more I showed up with the little I had, other people showed up with what they had to offer, and this concept of an oasis began. And I think that's what compelled me to keep going. I saw the need, and I saw that if I showed up, others would show up and lend a helping hand as well. But the other part of it is recognizing that there was going to need to be a phased approach to the recovery. The day something happens, everyone's in shock, right? You know, several months later, people are starting to get into that deeper recovery. And then I knew at a year, everyone would look back and say, okay, where are we now? Did we get what we needed, or are things even worse? And if you don't hold people in those moments, if you don't show up, you don't try to be present, they can come to the conclusion that there is no hope. And I fear that many have. So the reason we organized is really just organizing people and efforts and resources and continued to show up, is that we knew that presence was going to be needed for the long term. And we're certainly seeing that now.
How has the mission evolved over the last year?
Yeah, so the same way the needs evolved, crisis, recovery, and resilience, the mission has pivoted its offerings, not necessarily its mission, but its offerings to meet that moment. So initially it was food, water, super basic stuff. Then when we hit the cold weather, it was keeping people inside and with some sort of climate protection. But now as we approach 1 year, we're asking, have you been able to relocate? Is your house being repaired? Are you up on your utilities? Do you have a hope of getting into the next phase for your recovery that you see you want to have? I think everyone thought things would go a lot faster. I don't think anybody imagined that a year later, people's homes would be just as damaged as they were the day of the storm. And so the pivot is to say, okay, what resources are there, whether they're from the city, the state, the federal government, or other kinds of opportunities. What do you need? What do you want for yourself and your family? And how can we manage you into that? We call that Oasis care. So we went from across the board, show up, let's just make sure people can at least eat and drink, to, okay, what does recovery, deep recovery, mean for each individual and family that we're coming in contact with? We're still doing some of the basic needs stuff because food access is an issue for many. And also when you serve a meal, you can let people gather, sit with their neighbors, connect, talk, share. So that's still a core component of our offerings. And then we're doing that as much as possible across the tornado track. So we have a hub in Fountain Park, we have a hub in O'Fallon, across the street from O'Fallon Park, and several outreach locations in between.
You said something interesting that we've heard from other storm victims that has said, we thought the process of recovery would have been a lot faster. What roadblocks or obstacles are you seeing, just talking with people that you serve, that is preventing the process from going faster?
Well, I think the biggest obstacle was there was not infrastructure in place to respond to a severe weather event. Many cities and neighborhoods across this country have learned that lesson as well. The thing is, there is a playbook for how to keep climate resilience in a community. And St. Louis had not done that work, bottom line. So there wasn't a plan for how to house people, how to feed people, how to make sure people stayed safe from future weather events that happened after the storm. There just wasn't a plan. And so part of it was having to make something from the ground up every step of the way. And that's not just been true for community organizations, that's been true for the city itself. So that's, I think, the biggest thing. You don't have to get ready if you're all ready, and we weren't ready. I think the second part is the bureaucratic processes that changed in front of our eyes with the federal government, which is a major source of recovery. Literally, the rules for FEMA changed 2 weeks before the tornado. One of the biggest things being the way that they directly engaged community members in the past. Without that direct engagement and needing the community itself, whether it was a city government or a nonprofit organization reaching out, that suddenly shifted overnight to the community. So then you had people who could have tapped maybe more deeply into those federal resources get left out because they didn't have a connection. That was one of the bigger driving forces that we had to realize over time. Oh my gosh, no one's going to connect the dots between our people and these resources. We need to do it ourselves. And I think the third part is a failure to recognize just how serious, how deep, and how profound the loss was, and the need to lead inside of that. In other words, maybe because the North Side had been divested and hurt for so long, people sort of just saw more of the same thing without realizing, no. This has the potential to destroy the city itself because such a huge percent of the population has been displaced. And I think a failure to see that for the depth that it really was across the board has caught us now to a place where we're behind. And I think people are scrambling now to better organize efforts. And my call to action is that we can no longer say we didn't know. We can no longer say we weren't prepared. We know now the depth of impact and we know what the future might bring, and we need to decide to invest in a better way of holding the human needs of the residents of this city up at a city level, at a nonprofit level, at an organizational level, neighborhood level. And that's a lot what our work is. Advocating at every level to be better ready to serve people's most essential basic needs in times of crisis.
How does 314 Oasis slide in to try to meet that need, continuously try to meet that need? And what is the biggest need that you hear from people that you serve in these communities?
So the biggest need is housing. That was a substantial need before the storm. It's an even greater need after. And the second part being not just the housing, but housing that's accessible, affordable, and in the same neighborhoods where people want to live so that they can stay connected to jobs, family, communities, and resources. The way that problem has been solved in other disasters is things like FEMA trailers or housing developments. And those, when looking at other disasters, like disasters in Texas or other parts of Missouri, really require a plan. So actually what we see is missing more than the housing is missing is a plan for the housing, which would require a multi-sector, highly collaborative, all-in effort from both the for-profit sector, developers, city government, state and federal government, and then the community itself. I mean, Fountain Park is going through some of those tensions right now, right? We're sitting across from a church that's being demolished that doesn't yet have a plan to rebuild because the depth of planning that it's going to take is immense, and there's going to need to be partnership. We're on a block with multiple vacant homes and a hope of developing them into homes, but will those homes be affordable to the people that need to move back in? And if all of these plans are put together patchwork and not in unison, the way, for instance, we saw people rebuild after Hurricane Harvey in Texas, or even after the tornado in Joplin, we're not going to get where we need to be. And I think it's, in the words of Kayla Reed, a time for low ego, high impact work. And I'm not seeing low ego, high impact work across these sectors. It's really serious. Like, you know, you could say that there's been a lot of challenges in the history of St. Louis, but the intense temporality of at one 10-minute period of time, so much damage happened at once. It really should and could have drawn us that much more into a united plan. But unfortunately, there's so much, I guess, competition for money and power. I'm not seeing that unified work. 314 Oasis is trying to do unified work.
Yeah. Have you expressed those concerns with the liaison to the Mayor Spencer, to the City Hall? And are you, do you like what you're hearing from them in response, or you want to see more from the city and getting that comprehensive plan together for the recovery in this area?
I have been as engaged in this process as I possibly could be, including being on the Mayor's Advisory Board, including going to budget hearings, including communicating as much as I can to the Recovery Office and the elders about what I'm actually seeing, that there's kids sleeping in cars, out of school, not with what they need, that there are people in houses that are moldy, that there are people who have been kicked out of temporary housing and need a longer term. I've been doing everything I can to communicate those things and been very engaged. And I would say I am very worried that we don't have the expertise we need to make this scale of a plan. And just recently, some folks from the Carnegie Foundation in DC came and shared some of their information in a project called Disaster Dollar database, and they have tracked these kinds of recoveries. And they've shared some information about professionals across the country that know how to do this, about advocacy that's needed to get the funds to do it. In particular, a bucket of money from HUD that would be available to us if we advocate rigorously at the Congress and federal level. So I just think there's a need to say, it's not enough to say it wasn't enough. We have to admit that we did not know what needed to be done. That's a very difficult thing to admit. But I'm a doctor. I have to admit all the time when I can't do something so I can get the right help there from the people who do know what to do. So my greatest, I think, call, and my greatest message lately has been, we need help. We need more help than what we have here, and we need help to create this larger scale redevelopment plan that doesn't just swoop in gentrification, but instead actually rebuilds the city so that the people who live here can stay here. And that's a massive effort, and it's going to require a massive reckoning to do the work that's going to need to be done. It's not about how expensive it is. That is actually not the issue. It's that hard of a job to rebuild from this kind of devastation. And I think we need more help to organize our efforts. And so I'm pushing now to get that kind of help, to get those advisors, to get those consultants, to get people across the country who know how to do this, to help us do more as we look at this year coming up.
As people in the St. Louis community and region see this, they might be asking them that same question. What are some tangible things I can do to help 314 Oasis? I can help North City. What is the answer to that right now as we approach a year since the tornado? How can people still help?
So I think, first of all, you must reconcile yourself to the truth that this disaster for many is still as if it's the same day of the tornado. Like, you can't look away. It's tempting to look away because it's a lot. But the destruction around us shows and bears witness that this is still an ongoing absolute crisis for people. Number two, I think people need to engage in the community-based grassroots work that's happening. And we are one of those efforts, 314 Oasis, and people can go to our website, 314oasis.com, to see our schedule, to see our offerings, and to get involved. There's also the People's Response with Action St. Louis that's been organizing tremendous work so people are aware of the issues and can advocate for themselves. And they currently have a campaign that's asking people to sign on, appropriating a significant portion, $150 million of the RAND's funds, to rebuild the north side. The other options, you can always go through United Way and sign up to volunteer. They do their best to connect people to volunteer opportunities. And I think the last thing is on May 16th, we're going to be hosting a series of events here in Fountain Park and in O'Fallon Park, as well as a screening of a documentary. And I guess maybe go back to number one, don't look away. Show up, get engaged, hear from your neighbors. And I guess the last thing is we cannot let the narrative that this is too much stop us from doing what we can. That is so essential.
Is that a problem? Too many people are focused on the roadblocks and the obstacles versus the solutions?
Absolutely, and quite honestly, that's a position of privilege. To say, oh, it's too much, we can't handle it, and then you go home and sleep in the bed at night. No, that ain't it. I think we have to continue to keep eyes on. So whether that's for you to be politically active and go to meetings, hear what's happening with the budget and advocate for recovery resources, whether that's for you to work with your church or faith community and make sure that you're volunteering. We're out here today with the church that's brought us meals. If you're looking at your place of business and deciding how is that business making sure it's investing back into people who need the most. And then also just personally, like I said, engaging with opportunities. But I think the most important thing is that we not blame the North Side for its own fall. This is a structural design that has been decades in the making, and I think there's a real opportunity to change things. I was talking to someone yesterday about the Joplin tornado recovery. Sure. And they said that Joplin experienced a 20% increase in population after the tornado over time, and also had many people move out of poverty. Now, that is a commitment for the community to heal as a whole. We have to decide the same thing here. And so I just really would have people challenge this narrative that it's too much, and instead step into the opportunity to be part of those solutions, of which there are many. 314 Oasis is just one of them.
Sure. With 314 Oasis, you mentioned the food distribution lunch that's going out here today. A church from Baldwin volunteering their time. I know that they've been out here many times before, but how is that just, you see a regional help like churches and other groups coming up to help 314 Oasis and help North City? What has that meant to the mission that you guys are trying to achieve?
That's the reason why we're here. Centennial Church at Baseline had a hunger, housing, and health ministry. And we pulled up to this area and collaborated with them to continue their work that they had been doing before. We just added to it. And so they have absolutely been a backbone, which includes multiple churches that are part of the Disciples of Christ denomination nationally, to support and continue the work, recognizing that this is a time to care for our neighbors if ever there was. And so when we didn't have funds for food, when we didn't have a place to set up, when we didn't know exactly where to go, they were an absolute guiding light and continue to partner in the work. It's essential. And this is what I mean. This is an example of a group of people who decided to not look away because they weren't looking away before the storm. So they were ready to say yes. And they just have jumped in alongside with us and helped us hold that mission. We're going to be doing this hub work through the whole summer, but in the fall we're going to transition to mobile outreach only. And we hope by then the church is able to take back over at least a component of its health, hunger, and housing ministry. But yeah, this is exactly the kind of collaboration we need for our communities to recover.
Yeah. To sustain a mission like yours that has been on the ground here in North City since the tornado hit, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes finances. How are you all able to sustain financially the mission? Are you getting private donations? Have you gotten grants? How does that look?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
So the number one thing is we decided as a core team to commit our full-time effort. We have a very small but strong leadership team to operate the hubs, facilities, and the administrative part. We are funded by both the St. Louis City's Recovery Office as well as the JSMF Foundation that have identified our temporary infrastructure as a necessary stopgap to prevent people falling into worse suffering and loss. We also have a lot of private small donations, whether it's in-kind donations or funds, and that's through our fiscal sponsor, Build Missouri Health. So we have a lot of different support that's come from many different places. But can you believe that across all of the work that we've done, we've served over 40,000 meals, we've done over 250 days of service, hundreds of events, we've had hours and hours of therapeutic care, and now we've got a very strong cohort of people that we're getting into this deeper care, that across all of that, you know, we have spent less than $1 million on the entire effort, when there have been millions and millions and millions and millions go out the door for other kinds of efforts. Now that might sound like a lot of money, but when you talk about the level of service we provided, for every hour that we spent, somebody donated another hour of care and resource. And so the Oasis, as a multiplier, it says, let me take what I have, let me show up and hold the space, and then let's let others fill in those gaps. That's been part of the magic. And we want to continue as a model for resilience in the future. So the Oasis is developing something called Community First Responder Network. It's a group of people who are individually trained in first response, like putting on a tourniquet or helping someone who's in heat stroke, but also a network of organizations that are in relationship with each other and can activate if another severe weather event happens. We think it's important we not get lazy. It is tornado season. We did have harsh heat waves last summer, so we want to be ready, even as we're still in this recovery, to be able to respond better. So that's another way that we're looking not just to do the thing. You can just do the thing and then, okay, we're done. We're looking to build the thing so that the entire region has a better capacity to respond in the future.
What is the next thing that can happen here in this North City area that can make a real impact, whether that be from the state, from the city, from the feds, or from nonprofit organizations? What is that next thing that needs to happen to make a real impact for the families here?
There needs to be $150 million of the RAMS funds put into a rebuild with a deep citywide development plan that includes a contributing sort of additional buy-in from local developers and people who want to match those funds. There needs to be a shifting of some of the state allocated funds which are now pretty much toward demolition and debris removal, also into rebuilding and housing. And then there needs to be a commitment, an explicit commitment to not gentrify the north side. This is absolutely essential. If we rebuild in a way that the people who live here can't come back, it's a failure. And so the next thing, though, is the brave step for St. Louis to invest in its own people first. I believe that if we set that significant portion of the RAMS funds into rebuilding, we will attract other kinds of investment, including compelling the federal government to give a similar amount of HUD funds for the rebuild, which is again what cities have relied on for disaster relief in the past. Rebuilding is the hard part. It's like, let's say you're in a car collision, you're in the ICU, you go home, you're in rehab. It's that first time you're really walking again without your crutches. It's hard. And that's going to take a long view and multiple layers of investment. So I think the next best thing is the RAMS funds, followed by a campaign to match that investment locally and federally with a plan. And without a plan and a clear set of steps that says, this many affordable housing units in this neighborhood, this many new house builds in this neighborhood, this many new apartments stabilized, and this commitment to rent control. Like, unless it's that kind of a plan, the only thing it will do is gentrify us. And so I think it's super, super important.
Are you hopeful?
Well, I'm here. And if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't be here. Listen, I'm a trauma surgeon. I've seen people face death itself. I have seen things worse than death. And I know that what determines your trajectory is the connection you have to the people who care for you and the knowledge that you have the choice to express your power in the moment about what comes next for you. North City deserves the opportunity to determine its next step. And that's not going to happen if we decide for it that it's already gone. And so this is why I'm showing up and advocating and being vocal and being present, because here's the other part. And this shouldn't be the reason why this matters, but it's still the truth. The North City is the North Star of this city. Its physical location, its assets, and its history are essential to the well-being of this region. You can think that that's not true, but it's completely true. And that means that everybody in the region needs to be concerned about what happens next in North City. And that gives me hope, because that's a ton of power. When you realize, you can't just look away. You can't just look away. This is about you too, no matter where you live, whether you're in, O'Fallon or Creve Coeur. Like, we've got to work together. So, yeah, I have hope. The sun is still shining and the storm didn't break the sky. But we're here, and people keep showing up and contributing their best. Listen, Miss Pat Pendleton died in that church over there, and her husband is out here serving meals. If he has hope, I can show up. If he's finding a way to keep going, I can keep going.
Amen to that.
Appreciate it.